now that we have that technology. So how am I doing on time?
It's
Not
just
bad.
about,
Not bad.
you should just be finishing up.
We were supposed to start, yeah.
Yeah,
So good, because I am then just about to finish. The point I want to emphasize is that what takes in the relating, what comes back from the person, is that person's own, not something that I brought in, even though originally I brought it in, maybe. Because there is somebody in there, and what I'm really interested in from start to finish is that person in there. I'm working for that person. And so it can't be that my method is limited to people who can do that. Nowadays, a lot of clients come to me and they know about me and focusing, so they think they have to focus. And oh my God, what if I can't focus? And so then I laugh and I say, oh no, I'll show you that by and by. But there's a million other things we can do other than focus, for God's sakes, right? So that's where I get sore when people contrast the going in silence with the interaction, because all of focusing is interaction. And when I'm alone, focusing by myself, then I am relating to myself. And unfortunately, the relationship that I have to myself isn't always that good. And partly I'm still relating to my parents and all kinds of things, but I'm focusing as a human being, and a human being is always relational. It's always relating. And when you're alone relating to yourself, you're double relating, because you're relating to yourself and you're also in a relational climate. That's why the focusing attitudes are important, if you can manage them from the book. But really, you need a partner. And with a partner, focusing always goes deeper. And I always brag about my research project of 1,000 runs on the same subject, because I got deeply involved in research for many, many years. So I think it's very dramatic to say, I have a research project in which I ran the same subject 1,000 times. Can you imagine a subject standing still for that? Nobody has a research like that, but I do. I have the same subject on the same day, in the same climate, with the same diet, with everything controlled. It's an ideal research. And that's me, of course, focusing by myself and then focusing with my partner. And there is a huge difference. And it's perfectly true that with this partner, certain things can come, and with that partner, other things come, not those things. But they're both of them mine. They come out of me. And it's true that the way my partner is makes the difference. But they're both of them my response. They're not the way I interpret the words co-created. But they certainly come because of the co. Okay, there I'll stop.
Good.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to share with you a little bit about the relational emphasis that we've been developing. And I gave out a continuum, which Gene said he was going to fight with, and I said,
Your mic is not strong.
let's see here. I'm going to have some trouble, Charlotte, holding this thing and dealing with this continuum at the same time.
Oops, okay, let me move this.
I don't know if I can do this.
I'll hold it. I'll just bring a chair over.
Oh, okay.
Can you see why I would object to the continuum as different from whatever's right about the continuum? Can you make that distinction? I want to be both positive and argue with it. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, This thing has to be right up here, which is very difficult.
This is for the video, and this is for.
Yes.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me? Does everybody have their continuum? Good. This is a continuum, and I want to assure Jean, this is not a philosophical or theoretical continuum. It's a continuum of therapist responsiveness. And it is a continuum of I have here a keyboard because one of the people, Monica, in our Monday morning group said, well, it's like a piano keyboard. We're playing all of the notes, and I just love that. So if we picture this as a kind of piano and the therapy relationship as going all over this, this keyboard and following the melody, both of the people, as Jean says, both people are trying to make a relationship for the one in there, for the one deep down. And we do that on this side through carefully reflecting what the client is saying, encouraging the client to pause, to find something here, as Jean says. The silence is important. The attitude of receptivity and of quiet is very important in these moments. And on this side and this side are all equally relational, but they look different. This side, the therapist and the client, are actively talking to each other. They're playing with each other. I would never say they're co-creating. But let's say they're playing together, and they're expressing themselves together. This side is an expression of the two people together, engaged with each other, and this side, this moment, is a moment of the client finding her own experience in that moment. Now, of course, this side is also the client's own experience. And this side also, of course, both people are deeply involved with each other. But the keyboard has a different flavor and different activities. All of these activities are meant to bring out and develop the client, as well as, I would say, as well as the dyad, as well as the pair, as well as making a new kind of relationship. And the new kind of relationship fosters a new kind of being, so that when Gene felt in the presence of his therapist a new self, it was a new kind of relatedness that made a new sense of self. And so this whole keyboard is trying to find a new relatedness that makes a new sense of self. Now, in the middle of the continuum, I have asking into poetizing. This side here, the middle of the keyboard, the therapist is actively involved with her or his own felt sense and finding the right kind of images and words that will invite what's there. The therapist, it's not good enough, and Jean will agree with me here, it's not good enough to try to help the client to make a better relationship with themselves. It's not good enough to say, can you find compassion for that there? The person is having a lot of trouble finding compassion for that there. What's helpful is for the therapist to find compassion, and then as the therapist is interested in accepting, welcoming of that in there, that deep one inside, then of course that makes a relational togetherness that has a receptivity to that. So in the middle here, the therapist is making a relationship, inviting, welcoming, invoking, inviting that one inside with her own words, felt sense, images, and metaphors. And on this side of the keyboard, the therapist and the client are in conversation, in play. I'm going to give you just a tiny little example. There was an example of Lois Greifer from our Thursday group, and I don't think she's here today. No, she's not here. She gave an example of improvisation in which her client was saying, "Oh, I'm so timid. I'm such a wimp. I can't even drive in New Jersey traffic. I can't even find my way. I just don't know. I just can't be an adult here. Every adult can drive a car in New Jersey." And so the therapist, all of you are focusing people are very familiar with this problem of what we've called the critic. The therapist said to her, "Yes, I see what you mean, but where are all these people?" So the client looks up and says, "Well, they're not sitting in this chair." And so then the therapist laughs and said, "Well, they're not sitting in this chair." And so there's a whole different feeling in that playfulness, and the session proceeds from a very, very different place. That's what I'm calling improvisation. The improvisation isn't necessarily, sometimes it can be a drama, sometimes it can be a sand play, sometimes it can be role play, it could be anything, but it doesn't have to be. It can be simply finding a way of being engaged with it from a different place. And so there's a kind of new living further that is happening through this whole keyboard. But we're doing the living further on this side by engaging together in a different way than is possible to come from the client alone. The therapist is introducing something. The therapist is wanting to know what kind of interaction is this one down here, this inner self. What kind of interaction is needed? And there are all kinds of interactions that are needed by people, all kinds of relational experience that's needed. Sometimes it's needed to have a witness. Sometimes it's needed to have a playmate. Sometimes it's needed to have the feeling of someone that's bigger than me that can take care of me. Sometimes it's needed to have the feeling of a likeness. Sometimes it's needed to feel deeply appreciated by the other. Sometimes it's needed just to be silly together. There are many kinds of interactions that this one down here is calling for, that the therapist is sensitive to and wanting to be able to be free to go all over this keyboard. So that's what I'm going to say here. And that was only 10 minutes. So we're a little bit.
Ask you some questions.
Yes.
Because we're going to have dialogue now, right?
Yes.
And
now
not,
we're
not
gonna,
very long. We're going to let them in very soon.
Right. We're going to have some dialogue, and then we're going to let them in, and they're going to be part of our dialogue.
Yes, and we're both eager for you to come in. So we don't need to say much. I want to first say that what Lynn is teaching here is good stuff. And if you don't know it, learn it. Then I want to disagree with it, right? I don't disagree with it as stuff that we, coming from listening, tend not to know how to do very well.
Which is the stuff that coming from listening, you don't know how to do very well, just to
Those
clarify
lovely
for
things that you
people?
just laid out.
Playing,
Playing
engaging,
and engaging in a certain way and
finding inviting a conversation that's touching
yes,
and gripping and meaningful.
any of those things. You want those in your repertoire so that when you are there sort of open without applying a method, they will come to you. And then the other thing is that you don't, in my opinion, you don't have to reduce your concept of psychology just to that. That's what theories tend to do. They want to sell you, and methods too. They want to sell you on the fact that therapy works just for this reason, just because of this thing, and just do this thing, and then you're doing therapy. And so the percentage of success is roughly the same all the way across all the wildly different things. Doesn't matter if you do guided imagery or if you do role play or if you do whatever you do, because so many of these methods are done just as methods. This is what I do. I don't take Lynn to mean it that way. Okay, so then I don't disagree. Where I disagree is on the keyboard notion. I want to say you can only play part of the keyboard at a time. I think to think is an orchestra. You can't explain an orchestra, right? The reason people go to hear an orchestra is because even the tape is not anything like what it sounds like when you're surrounded by the sound of the orchestra. That's really the main difference I have. But then it gets down into the detail. So Lynn said that when I walked in the room and I was already different, that was a new self. I'm saying, no, that was me. Now, it was very new to me because when I was, I don't know what, 3 days old already, part of me got very discouraged and it didn't ever recover. But that's the point I'm trying to make, is no, that's not a new self, that was me. And
Can I, do you want me to respond to that, Jean?
yeah, if I could just sum it up somehow. It's the, or when somebody is focusing and they arrive somewhere, I will say, oh, so is that relational or is that focusing? It used to be that we tried not to react to the content because it was like saying, well, when you get this kind of a thing, then we approve, and therefore you better get this kind of thing all the time. Now I'm through with that. I like to show my response to everything that goes on. So when the silence is too long, I may cough or move around noisily in my chair because I don't want to be lost track of. I want to be there. So to me, the person focusing, even silently, is just as relational as it is when we play and we hope that the focusing, that the person reaches inside themselves more. So for me, that comes from the inside. Yes, it's your turn.
I like your idea of the orchestra. Of course, there are many instruments and many dimensions. And of course, you know, Jean, that I'm not talking about a method. You know that.
No, that's why I said
I'm
right from the
talking
start.
about, I am talking about skills, though.
Yeah.
I have a new
Yeah.
idea
Yes, that's
that
good.
along in contemporary psychoanalysis, we've decided that technique is out, because technique is sort of a one-size-fits-all. It used to be thought that if you had the right interpretation, the right technique, that then that's what was needed. And in a new sensibility in psychoanalysis, there's many different papers and discussions about how we don't believe in technique. But then that leaves young clinicians learning all of these theories, sitting down with difficult patients in clinics, saying, what do I do? What do I do? And being completely at sea. My idea is that every theory has a something to do that's implied by the theory. And the something to do I call skills. And skills are different than techniques because you have a repertoire of skills like a musician does. But then when the musician is improvising, all of those skills, all that knowledge of scales, knowledge of the instrument, is all in there. But the musician isn't necessarily thinking about all of those things. So that's what I'm calling skills.
Right.
It's very important to have skills, and this continuum gives just a little sort of sketch of the kinds of skills that we want therapists to develop. The skills of helping people to find themselves inside in simple ways, like, how is that here? And the skills of asking into something. What is that like when you say that to me? What was that just happened now between us? That kind of question. Or, oh, that sounds like the thing that you were saying the other week about blah, blah, blah. Or it's a such and such kind of feeling. And then waiting to see if that does something. Or the skills of back and forth talking about what I call talking about the you and me of the relationship, which is a very, very important thing to be able to do and very, very difficult to do in our culture, very rare to do. So it's very rare to be listened to the way client-centered people listen and Jean listens. And it's also very rare to have the kind of intimate exchange where you can talk with another person about your deep longings having to do with them, your disappointments with them, your wishes for them, to try out new behaviors with them, to fight with them when you've never fought before, to relax with them when you've never relaxed before, to talk about how meaningful that last thing was, whatever it is that happened between you. When Jean was so shy in the beginning in therapy, we would want a therapist that would be aware of his shyness and be very tender with that shyness.
Be very what?
Tender with the shyness. And also want maybe to bring out a little bit more, to find a little more freedom there. I also want to say that I agree that it isn't a new, it's not that a new us makes a new me, but there's, as I develop, there's the sense of new experience and new living, and there's every moment a new kind of me. But of course that me is all me. But the feeling of a new me, such an important feeling, the feeling of being reborn in this moment, the feeling of something new in me just coming to life, and how that happens. Jean, want to say something, or shall we ask them?
Well, I don't have much to say that I haven't already said. I wouldn't like my therapist to have decided what I needed, which is one of the dangers in theories and methods. But other than that, I would agree that it would have been nice if he could have done that. Then he probably would have seen me shrink down into my chair and he wouldn't have done it again. But I would say, from my point of view, it would be good for him to know how to do that. He didn't know how to do that. But then again, he was extremely relational because he was always like this, you know, trying to hear and whatnot. The difference that I'm looking for is to have, what I mean by the orchestra is to have the relating and the method, any other method, together. you wouldn't want somebody to relate to you not from deep down inside on Tuesdays, and then to sit there silently and not feel you while they're going inside themselves on Wednesdays, if you see what I mean. Or in the first half of the hour, in the second half of the hour. Because you would be just as much there every moment with them while they're silent. And if not, then do something. Make a noise at least. Don't let them sink over there in autism, because now we're focusing. And then later relate from yourself, all right, but don't not need them to go inside to get the depth of what's going on, because now we're relating. And you don't mean it that way. When you say we're playing, you include the fact that you would like your person to sense themselves playing, and not just playing with you, but sense themselves playing. And that's as much as you're telling us, that, oh,
Right.
this might be something, it's a new way, that, or at least a fresh way, that they can feel themselves.
Let me
So the difference and the sameness should be relatively clear, but let's open that.
Okay, let me say just a couple of things there. One thing is that that whatever we're doing on this keyboard, we want to be checking, and we learn that from focusing. And so it's wonderful. I don't know if Lois, with her improvisation, said, "How is it now to the room seems different?" That would, I don't know if she said that, but that would be the kind of thing that we know to do, to say, what happened there, or how is that now, or some way of the finding the place from, and what's changed and what's needed from there. So that checking is always an important kind of thing, although you may wait until after the whole play is sort of has its own form before you do that. The other thing I just wanted to say is when you said you don't want the therapist to decide what you need, there's a principle that we have in focusing about putting something out or living something and being so sensitive to, is it needed? I'm doing this, but I know that this isn't going to be the specificity of the implicit intricacy. But I'm saying, oh, I think this is needed, and I make that movement. And then, as Jean said years ago, and I always remembered this, a sensitive therapist isn't one that knows. A sensitive therapist is one that pays very, very close attention to the next thing that happens, not only verbally, but non-verbally, after the therapist is doing something, being something, attending to something. And so that's a very, very important principle. And I don't see these as two separate methods at all, but as one whole way of making a relationship with this one deep inside. So now let's listen to you. Yes.
So related a bit to the comment from Jean about the person feeling herself playing, and to the thing being a whole.
Yes.
The way I can follow the keyboard is a sense that what this is about oscillating with the different modes or different types of resonating. And one pole is resonating inside, resonating within oneself. Another, that's just the ownness. Then the other part is the we-ness is resonating with another person. And that, the keyboard, in a way, the way I see it, is a pendulum, where there are some moments where the oscillation is in the resonating within oneself. So partly it's a part where the therapist is training the client to resonate within themselves. Other moments where that capacity is there, and maybe there's the experience of playing together, resonating with each other. And maybe another swing of the pendulum when you go back to the ownness is that sense of sensing or feeling that you have been playing. And that, the pendulum can go between both, and that there is a connection, between the focusing, that you do throughout, the relatedness to other and the relatedness to self, and it's about developing the capacity for resonance.
Well, I would both agree with it and argue with it the way I do with that. I think in terms of what a therapist does, no, I don't think, no. Let me just argue with it. I think you said it quite well. I wouldn't like the implication, which you didn't mean, nobody ever means this, but you said, the implication that when I am playing with you as a therapist, then I am not resonating with myself. Then I don't feel myself. When in fact, the way change happens in therapy, I think, is precisely that I am feeling myself while it's going on with you. And for some months at least, at first, when I leave, I don't think that. I can't even grasp that that happened very often. All I know is that it was, I liked it or something. So I'm saying that we resonate more and more and more during the interaction. And we become more interactional during the time that we sit silently, because this other person is actually going to understand me.
I'd like to say that it's that the more we are connected to ourselves, the more we are connected to the other, the more we're connected to the whole universe, or to that whole big thing. It's about, therapy is about that wanting the experience of connectedness that makes me feel more myself and more of the sense of belonging to you and to the whole big thing. But there is a kind of attention oscillation, that I may be paying attention to what's coming here at one moment, and the next moment I'm looking at you and I'm seeing what's about to happen in you, and I'm paying attention to you. But at the same time, I'm registering in here what I'm seeing on your face. I see you nod your head, and I feel that in here. And then I feel the whole room somehow there.
So a shift in focus, that you're developing, you're increasing your ability to be with self while with other, and vice versa. But maybe we're talking about very small shifts in focus, where during one moment, you're going to be a little bit more focused in the experience of being with other while feeling self. And then digesting that, losing a little contact with the other, and doing this back and forth.
I would agree with that, and I encourage therapists to make a place in therapy for their own experience of going inside and being quiet for a minute, especially when you're stumped. I think it's a wonderful thing in the middle of a heated interaction in therapy to say, let me just take that in for a minute, or let me just see where I am with this right now. And then to just go inside for a second and sort of leave. You're still, of course, with the client, but you're paying attention to yourself differently. And then you can come back to the client in a new way. So I like that sense of the attention being oscillating. Anybody else? Yeah.
I wonder if Gene could say how he would express the goal of therapy and contrast that answer for what his goal for any given session of therapy might be.
The difference between the goal of therapy and the goal of,
Any particular therapeutic session, individual session.
oh. I wouldn't have any idea, because, no, really, because what happens is so from around the corner, is so out of the implicit that, I may think it's a little thing and it's brought what we're working for, or vice versa. I may think, oh yeah, this is a moment when it's really happening, and it didn't.
So is the goal of, there is no difference between the goal of therapy. What is the goal of therapy?
No, it's not that there's no difference between the goal of therapy and the goal of a session. I understand what you're saying. It's just that I don't know either one of those. Because what is going to happen is so much better than what I can dream up, that it would be just a terrible thing if what I thought was the goal was all that's going to happen.